next lecturer is Anthony Follari. This is his first time speaking to the PLN group. I'm really pleased that he's agreed to come this year. Thank you.
Is that good? Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony Follari, and this workshop is about the fundamentals of spagyrics. Now, spagyrics is an immense field of study. It incorporates alchemy, physics, chemistry, Qabalah, astronomy, astrology, herbology, and so on and so on. You can dedicate your entire life to the study of spagyrics and really only scratch its surface. It's that rich. Now, we only have a few hours over the next few days, so obviously we can't cover all of spagyrics, but we can cover the fundamentals. Our intent is to give you the theoretical understanding. I got blasted there for a second. Theoretical understanding and the practical experience you need to start your own exploration in spagyrics. We'll divide the workshop into two parts. Today is the theoretical part. We'll cover what spagyrics is, what's our role as a spagyricist, and exactly what is the spagyric process. How do we make spagyric products? What do we do to separate them, assemble them, and how do we charge them? The second part will be in the lab, and that will be at Russ's house. In the lab, what we're going to do is actually take two plants completely through the spagyric process. Additionally, we'll also show you how to set up, use, and maintain your lab equipment. Now, in working these two plants, we're going to take them through two different processes. So you'll get to see two different ways of processing plants. One's a little bit more complicated and one a little bit simpler. When we're done, all the people who participate in making these spagyric products, will divide them up amongst those participants. This will give you two products. 2 out of the 7 you'll need to do some special work, which we'll detail shortly. Now, before we start, I must tell you that I don't claim to have all the answers in spagyrics. Spagyrics is both an art and a science. There are more than one way to do many of the processes, and there are more than one way to view many of the concepts. All I can do is share with you what I do, share with you my understanding and my current way of processing them. I say current because it's ever-changing as I learn more. I'm not asking you to accept anything that I say and say this is fact, but I believe if you're just starting in spagyrics, you can use this as a strong foundation for your own exploration. So with that said, let's get started. What exactly is spagyrics? Well, I could give you a long and lengthy definition, but I won't. Instead, I'm going to give you a symbol. Actually, 2 symbols. The first symbol is this. Actually, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, so this is kind of a lengthy definition. The first symbol is this, a circle and square. I believe this symbol, and the next one I'll show you, is emblematic of what spagyrics and alchemy is all about. This symbol is called squaring the circle. It posed a problem for mathematicians and geometers of long ago. The challenge was this. Try to make a circle who had the same outside perimeter or circumference as a square or the same interior surface using only 2 tools, the geometer's tools, which were a set of compasses and a straight edge. Using only those 2 tools, you cannot solve this problem. You cannot make a circle and a square with the same interior area or the same perimeter. If the reason is you're using compasses, so you're using a radius. A radius you need to convert into the circumference. You're using pi, which is an irrational number. It goes on forever and ever. You can't take the infinite and divide it into 4 pieces. So mathematically and geometrically, this problem can't be solved. However, this is not a mathematical and geometrical problem. It's a metaphysical statement. Squaring the circle esoterically means this. The circle represents unity, the infinite, represents spirit. The square represents the 4 elements, or matter. Squaring the circle is spirit being clothed or encased in matter. This is involution. This is manifestation. This is spirit taking on a denser and denser level of expression. But again, this is only half the story. The other half of the story is this. I'm not the greatest artist, so excuse my drawing. It's circling the square. Circling the square is just the opposite. It's taking matter and raising it to a higher vibratory level. It's spiritualizing matter. This is evolution. This is what Spagyrics and alchemy is all about. It's raising or spiritualization of matter. It's working with nature to evolve matter to a higher state, to a higher level of refinement. When we talk of spirit and matter, we're taking really a dualistic perspective. We're saying that there's spirit on one side and matter on the other. These are two polar opposites of each other. But in actuality, there are no dualities. All dualities can be reconciled at a higher turn of the spiral. It's said on the way to enlightenment that the adept reconciles all dualities. As you reconcile one duality, you find its common essence. When you take that common essence, it forms a duality on another level. So now you take that duality, you find its common essence, and you reconcile that duality, and it forms a duality on another level. And so on, until ultimately you get to total unity, and there are no more dualities. That sounds great in theory, but what does that mean? Let me give you a concrete example. Let's take a common duality. Let's say that we have construction and destruction. And let's say we had a piece of land here, and we were going to construct a house, a log home, let's say. And over here, we had a house already built, and we were going to destroy it. So we're going to construct here, and we're going to destruct over here. Well, in order to build the house, the first thing we must do is clear the land. So we're destroying the land to build our house. Then we have to build a foundation. So we have to destroy the earth now to build our foundation. Now we're making a log home. So we have to go out and destroy some trees so we can get the logs for our home. Then we have to destroy the logs to fit them within our log cabin, and so on and so on. So the whole construction process is really a destructive process, is it not? Now let's look at the destruction. We have a house. Well, if we knock it down, don't we create a pile of rubble? There is no construction or destruction. It's all perspective. The only common essence here that neutralizes this duality is transformation. Things are going through a transformation. We label it as constructive or destructive. There is no construction, destruction. It's the same process. It's transformation. Now, let's take what we just, from this perspective, let's take this perspective and apply it to spirit and matter. If we look at spirit and matter from different perspectives, one is a theosophical perspective. Perspective, theosophically speaking, they say spirit, which they say is a circle, symbolically, is nothing but matter in its finest form. And they say matter, and since it's the same substance, they also use another circle, is nothing but spirit in its densest form. So spirit, this top circle, is matter in its finest form. And matter, the bottom circle, is spirit in its densest form. Theosophically, they recognize the oneness of this substance. It's the same stuff, it's the same substance, just at different densities. Then theosophically, they go on to say that the interplay between spirit and matter, the friction that's created there, the heat that's created there, forms this, what's called a vesica Pisces, this little football-shaped thing in the middle. And it forms consciousness. So the interplay between spirit and matter forms consciousness. That's an interesting perspective. In fact, occult geometry, or mathematics, 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 plus 1 equals 3. 1, 2, 3. Now let's look at this from another perspective. Instead of saying that consciousness, this centerpiece, is the result of spirit and matter, what if we look at it from the perspective of saying that consciousness is generating spirit and matter? Now that's in line with the Hermetic axiom, saying that all is mind or all is consciousness. So we have two perspectives now. One says that spirit and matter, the interplay between the two, forms consciousness. And the other perspective is that consciousness is now forming the interplay is now forming spirit and matter. Well, which one is correct? Well, they both are. It all depends on your perspective. I'd like to give you an example. If I show everybody this form, well, you've all seen. In fact, hold on, let me put an overhead up here. From one perspective, we can say, I lost my place here, so you have to excuse me. I wasn't ready to do that. I thought the projector was already up there. Let me leave these out. From the macrocosmic perspective, we can say that that consciousness, from the macrocosmic perspective, we can say that consciousness is generating the dance between involution and evolution, creating spirit and matter. From the microcosmic level, from us, we can say that the interplay of spirit and matter is forming our consciousness. Because after all, if I was to die right now, my consciousness moved on, the world doesn't end. My consciousness is not holding all of creation in together. My consciousness is holding my body together. If my consciousness leaves this body right now, the individual cells which are alive and growing will disassemble. My consciousness is holding me together. So in a microcosmic perspective, spirit and matter is forming my consciousness. On a macrocosmic level, consciousness is now generating the spirit and matter. Is that kind of clear? Yes? These two concepts are important, and we'll refer back to them a little later. Let's get back to spagyrics for a moment. You can make a plant essence, and you can also go to a health food store, and you can buy a plant essence. What's the difference? Well, in order to answer that question, what we have to do is take a very cursory look on how you make both products. The typical product you buy in a health food store is they take a plant, they pour some kind of alcohol on it, usually a grain alcohol. They let it sit there for a while. They decant it off, maybe squeeze out the plant a little bit to get more of the juice out, and they bottle it. And that's your typical tincture that you buy in a health food store. They usually dilute it with a certain level of water. A spagyric product, again, there's many ways of making them. I'll run very quickly through one method. First, you take the plant and you extract the essential oils out of it. You put that to the side. Then you take what's left and you ferment it. And the fermentation process breaks the plant down even further and releases certain components. You distill those components off, and you put that to the side. Now you're left with two things. You're left with the plant matter that's there, that the health food store manufacturer threw out, and you're left with all this liquid matter. Well, you take the liquid matter and you evaporate it down, and it turns into a gummy stuff, and you incinerate that, and you take out certain minerals from it, and you put that to the side. But now you have the rest of the plant matter. You take that, and you incinerate that, and you reduce it to the mineral content. You take those minerals and you put that to the side. Now you assemble all that together. You're capturing more of the plant. You're not using just a piece of the plant. You're capturing the larger picture of the plant. So a spagyric product has more of the plant in it. You say, well, why don't I just consume the whole entire plant? Well, you can, but the spagyric process opens up the cellular structure, opens up the plant, and allows more of the nutrients in there to be bioavailable, to be able to be absorbed. Juicing is very popular. They say you get more nutrients out of juicing than eating the whole food because it's broken down more so your body could extract it. Well, the spagyric process opens the plant up more so you can extract more out of it. But there's a third factor, and this is, I believe, the most important. We're not just talking about physical matter. If prepared properly, that's the key word, if it's prepared properly, the spagyric essence or spagyric product has more life force in it, more energy in it. Remember over here, we have spirit, consciousness, and matter. The stuff you buy in the health food store is mostly this stuff. It's mostly the plant matter. A spagyric product, if it's made properly, will not only contain matter, but it will have these finer energy levels also manifesting through this. We'll elaborate that in a little bit. A good example would be, you can't go into a laboratory and synthesize chemically vitamins and minerals and all these foods and live on them. You would die. There's no life force in them. Now, the stuff you buy in the health food store is actually made out of food, so there is some food quality there. But we need a certain amount of food energy, life energy, to sustain us. Now, I have a tincture here that I prepared, and I'd like to give you a small demonstration. I said that spagyric extracts have more energy in them. I can't show you energy. I can show you perhaps a demonstration of energy. Now, I'm not saying that all spagyric products do this, because they don't. And I'm not saying that the ones you buy in a health food store don't, because they might. But it just shows, as an example, that there's something in spagyric products that are beyond the normal realm of what we think of as just some kind of liquid or some kind of product. In order to see this, we're going to have to kind of come up, well, if you do it several times, I'll put it on the table here. All I'm going to do is take a product that I made. It's from Queen Anne's lace, which is a wild weed that grows outside here. And I'm going to put a few drops in this water. And if we can come up maybe like a row or two at a time, and let's see what happens when we put this spagyric product in the water. Can I borrow your notepad, the black, just so we can have more contrast so we can see? Thank you. Whoops, sorry about that. I hope you will be able to see this. They won't be able to see this on the video, or perhaps they will if we get a close-up. But if whoever would like to see, if we just get maybe 5 or 10 people up here at a time. Okay, I don't know if you'll actually be able to see it from that. I don't know how close you can get. But does anybody else want to come up here? You won't be able to see it there. You have to get pretty close. What you want to do is focus on the surface tension of the water. And watch what happens when these drops hit the water. It's kind of subtle. The first few you may not see, but once you start to... Can anybody see that? Now, if there is a difference between a spagyric extract and one you buy in the store, what can we attribute this difference to? Well, in order to answer that question, we have to take a look at what the role of the spagyricus is. Spagyricus is basically a facilitator. We are providing the proper environment for processes to take place. You are not really distilling something in the lab. You are merely setting up the proper environment for nature to take its course. Perfect example is if I plant a seed in the ground, I'm not growing anything. All I'm doing is providing the right circumstances for nature to grow whatever I plant. I'm participating, but I am not creating. Now, a spagyricus also mimics nature. We do the same thing nature does, only in a microcosmic way. For example, when a plant dies, the sun evaporates the sap out of the plant. Well, it's sort of like a distillation. When a plant decays, it ferments, it rots. That's the same thing we do in the lab when we ferment a plant. When it rains, that's the same thing that happens in our condensers. We condense certain vapors. When it rains and it leaches out a rotten plant, a plant that fermented on the ground, it's leaching salts, and so on and so on. All the processes we do in the lab are exactly what takes place in nature. In fact, as Spagyricists, we are all Spagyricists whether we know it or not. Our mouth is a mortar and pestle. Our stomach is a fermentation chamber. Our intestines are a receiver, a distillation receiver. We excrete waste just as the caput mortem is thrown out in a laboratory process. Our bodies are literally laboratories, and we're going to expand on that shortly. But that makes it sound like Spagyrics is a passive art. Well, it's not. Just because we facilitate nature doesn't mean that we are not doing anything ourselves. As a Spagyricist, we are a center of expression within the divine hierarchy. We take energy in, and we radiate energy out. Things affect us, and we affect things. In fact, if we hear good news, our heart may race, and we may jump up and down with joy. If we hear bad news, we may be brought to tears. Just a few words can change the way we think, which can affect our heart rate, can affect our glands, which affect our hormones, which affect our brain chemistry, and so on. Now, this has all been proven medically, but can our consciousness affect things outside our bodies? I'd like to read you a quote. This is from a book called The Physicist's Conception of Nature. And there's a little quote from the author. It says, in atomic physics, the scientist cannot play the role of a detached observer, but becomes involved in the world he observes to the extent that he influences the properties of the observed objects. John Wheeler sees this involvement of the observer as the most important feature of the quantum theory, and has suggested, therefore, replacing the word observer with the word participator. In Wheeler's own words, he says, nothing is more important about the quantum principle than this, that it destroys the concept of the world as sitting out there, with the observer safely separated from it by 20 centimeter slab of plate glass. Even to observe such minuscule an object as an electron, he must shatter the glass. He must reach in. He must install his chosen measuring equipment. It is up to him to decide whether he shall measure position or momentum. To install the equipment to measure one prevents or excludes his installing the equipment to measure the other. Moreover, the measurement changes the state of the electron. The universe will never be the same afterwards. To describe what has happened, one has to cross out the old word observer and put in its place the new word participator. In some strange sense, the universe is a participatory universe. You see, modern science is just catching up with what the arcane wisdom has stated all along, that all is connected and nothing exists in isolation. You can't separate the experimenter from the experiment. They both affect each other. Spagyrics and alchemy capitalize on this fact. In fact, in my opinion, are based on this fact. The mental and emotional states you bring into the lab affect not only you, but affect the work you're doing, literally. And I'd like to do a small little exercise. Real simple. I'm just going to ask everybody, if you want, you don't have to, if you'd just rather watch, just to stand up and sit down 3 times. But before you do that, I'd like to set something up. The first time, I'd like us all just to stand up and sit down. If anybody would like to humor me, well, please do this. Just stand up and sit down. And then sit back down. That's something we do dozens of times a day. It's no big deal. It's almost a subconscious reflex. That's what we do. We stand up, we sit down. I'd like you to do it again, but this time, I'd like you to think about something. I want you to pretend that this time you are all-powerful. You have the power of 1,000 people within you. And you're going to sit up just using just enough power to stand up in a controlled fashion, holding in reserve all this extra power in your mind. Again, do that again with that image in your mind that you are all-powerful. Stand up and then sit back down again. And just take a note how you feel, if you feel anything different or not. Now, again, feel humor me. One more time, but this time, I'd like you to think of something different. This time, I'd like to empty yourself. Forget about your personality. Become an empty vehicle for divine expression. Feel divine power rush in and fill your body. Feel this power come up, exude out your body, overflow into the room, and fill the whole room up with power. You are now an empty vehicle for divine energy, divine power to come through you. And stand up again, and then sit down. And take a note how you feel. Now, in all three cases, all you did was stand up and sit down. No big deal. If you put your heart and mind into it, really try to do this, you can generate quite a difference in each case. In fact, if you practice it, you can get quite good at it. I'm not suggesting that in the least bit. However, the point I want to make is this. Everybody who did this little exercise, I don't think anyone actually physically manifested divine power or the power of 1,000 people. But we all, to varying degrees, at least embraced the mental concept of it. In the third instance, we attempted to empty ourselves of ego and attune to an abstraction, an archetype, an unmanifested concept, one of divine power. By thinking about it, we clothed it with mental substance. We manifested our interpretation of it on the mental plane. We manifested it within our consciousness. We brought it down from an abstraction. It was only a concept. We brought it down from an abstraction into our consciousness. We clothed it in mental matter. You say unmanifested. Well, divine power is out there, but it wasn't in our consciousness at the moment. Just like right now, is anybody thinking of a pink elephant? But now if you start to think of a pink elephant, you have now took that archetype and brought it into your consciousness. We brought it down from an abstraction into the mental plane of existence. If we were pure enough, we may have been able to manifest it on even a lower plane than the mental, perhaps emotionally, perhaps even physically. In fact, we hear of miracles that adepts and masters of life have performed. Are they just illusions and exaggerations? Or are they able to bring their mental creations into a denser plane of existence? It is said that we all have this power, but we have to unfold it, and for a good reason. Think of how chaotic the world would be if everything we thought about instantly materialized. It would be a grave responsibility if you could do that. In order to be able to do that, it's said that we have to purify ourselves and align our will to the greater good of all. But this doesn't mean that we sometimes can't tap into that power. Have you ever heard of the woman who lifted a truck that was about to crush her child? For that instant, she embodied a power beyond herself, beyond her normal capabilities. The concepts and abstractions themselves are pure. It's our individual expression, or lack of ability to express it completely, that is the limiting factor. That's why the purer the vehicle, the better the expression. In the lab, we need to do the same exact thing. By emptying ourselves, we rid ourselves of ego and minimize psychic contamination. By embodying divine thought, we attract and imbue purity. By focusing on our intent, we facilitate the process. Remember, you can't separate the experimenter from the experiment. That's why it's so important to be present during your work. If you set your equipment up and you walk away, you're not imbuing all the power you can into your work. This doesn't mean you have to hover over your distillation in prayer, but you should be physically present, physically calm, emotionally calm, and mentally focused. The bottom line, if you want your work to be supercharged, then you have to work on yourself. You must empty yourself of all mundane matters, purify yourself, purify your thoughts, make yourself a fit vehicle for divinity, so it can manifest or unfold within you, and then radiate that energy out to your work. Remember, the content of your consciousness affects your work. It's as simple as that. As a spagyricist, we're working with specific principles. And let's talk about what these principles are, because this is, in my opinion, the heart of what we're doing. There are three main principles. They're referred to and have a glyph. They're called mercury, sulfur, and salt. There's mercury, sulfur, and salt. These are not, as their name implies, it's not the liquid metal mercury or the mineral sulfur or common table salt. But these names are symbolic of very subtle principles. One way to look at these principles is to compare them to ourselves. We could say that the mercury is the life force within us. It's kind of universal. We all have life force within us. We could say the sulfur is our individual expression of this life force. This is our consciousness. And we could say the salt is our physical body. Now, using the model over here, it corresponds quite nicely to what we were just saying. We could say, before we said spirit, consciousness, and body, we'll now can say mercury, sulfur, and salt. Spirit, soul, and body. But that's fine for human beings. But what about the plant kingdom? That's what we're really working with. In the plant kingdom, we could refer to it a little bit differently. We could say that the mercury is alcohol. Now, alcohol doesn't exist in the plant kingdom by itself with a living plant. But all plants can be fermented and to generate a certain amount of alcohol. Alcohol is universal within the plant kingdom. All plants can be fermented to create a type of alcohol. The sulfur we can relate it to, I want to emphasize the word relate, and I'll come back to that in a second, is related to the essential oils of the plant. Every plant has a different essential oil. It's its individual expression. And that's represented as sulfur. And the salt is the minerals of the plant. The plant has certain minerals. If you take the plant, that's why we eat certain plants, you get vitamins and minerals. The mineral content is what the salt is. Now, I said just a moment ago I wanted to emphasize the word related. I said the salt is the minerals. The sulfur and the mercury is related to, I said the essential oils and the alcohol is related to the sulfur and mercury. And that might sound confusing. You see, the physical containers, the alcohol and the essential oils, are not the sulfur and the mercury. They are the physical containers that these energies manifest through. Let me give you an example. Down here is the salt. Actually, everything the spagyricist works with is really down here in the lab. All the physical, tangible substances we manipulate and use and modify in the lab are physical substances. That includes the minerals of the plant, the essential oils, and the alcohol. They're all down here. They're all matter. However, if we handle them properly, they can have the finer forces of the sulfur and the mercury manifest through them. A vehicle of expression is down here. This is what we're utilizing, but we're really working with more subtle principles. Now, up to this point, we divided creation into three parts. We said this is all of creation, spirit, consciousness, and matter. We divided it into three pieces. But there are more than one way of dividing all of creation. In fact, all these divisions are arbitrary. They're just ways of explaining something. In fact, some philosophies break all of creation maybe into two, like the Taoists. They will say there's yin and yang. Some divide it into three, such as what we're doing here. And also Christianity will say the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Again, the same analogies apply. Some philosophies break all of creation into the four elements: earth, air, water, and fire. Some will break it into five by adding a fifth of Akasha. Some, like Theosophy and many others, will break all of creation into seven. Some, like the Taoists again, will break it into eight, the eight trigrams. Some into nine, the Enneagram. Others 10, like the Qabalah. Some 12, like astrology, and so on and so on and so on. All these other maps or all these other divisions are kind of helpful because the more you break it down, the more detail you get. It would be interesting to overlay our map of mercury, sulfur, and salt over another system, one that will give us more detail. Now, it's beyond the scope of this class to go into the Qabalah, but for those of you who are somewhat familiar with it, it might be interesting to make some comparisons. If we take this model that we have here, and we overlay the Tree of Life, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the Tree of Life, this is one representation of it. The Tree of Life is a glyph that has 10 emanations. If we take these two models and we overlay them together, we'll come up with this. Now, I eliminated all the paths and all the names for clarity. But we have the same two models overlaid together. From this perspective, the salt that we've been talking about is located down here in Malkuth, which is the bottom emanation on the tree of life. Again, that's physical, tangible matter. That's all the solid substances that we deal with. That's also, as a spagyricist, those are the physical things we're working in the laboratory. Our salts, our essential oils, and our alcohol. But notice that the circle that includes the matter goes all the way up to here. This big circle is matter, and it encompasses much more than just Malkuth. Because there are varying degrees of densities of substances. Just like we could have a solid rock, we could also have water, we could also have air. These are finer degrees of matter. But it doesn't stop at air. We can go past that. Modern science has found that they keep breaking things down into smaller particles. To go beyond air, we can go into molecules, we can go into atoms, we can go into subatomic particles. Science keeps breaking matter into finer and finer particles until we get to ultimately energy. But what about the things science hasn't been able to identify yet, hasn't been able to measure, such as emotions and thoughts? Well, these are also substances. Remember when we stood up, we embodied divine power in our minds? We clothed the concept with mental substance, mental matter. We created a thought form. Well, what's a thought form? What's a form made out of but substance? When you describe a picture in your mind, you're describing a thought form. It may seem intangible like air, but it's real. If it wasn't, you wouldn't be able to describe it. The matter that we're talking about is in this whole circle. The most densest aspect of matter is here. So that must mean that the finest aspect of matter is somewhere up here. In fact, the finest aspect of matter is right here. And that emanation is called Bina. Bina is the great mother, the primordial root of matter as it's called by the Qabbalists. In fact, in certain Yetziratic texts, they say that Malkuth sitteth upon the throne of Bina. There is an intimate relationship between Malkuth, which is down here, and Bina, which is up here. Bina is the doorway into the third dimension, into matter. I shouldn't say the third dimension, I'm sorry. Is the doorway into the essence of matter. But notice that this bottom circle, which is matter, doesn't contain all of Bina. It only covers a portion of it. Because a part of Bina is so refined, so rarefied, that there is no more matter at that point. It's pure spirit. The same applies to our upper circle. The upper circle represented spirit. And its lowest expression is all the way down here, and its finest expression is all the way up here. Finest expression is in Kether. Its lowest expression, the lowest emanation they can take is down here in Yesod. So the finest expression of spirit is here, the densest expression is here. With the salt, the densest expression is here, and the finest expression is up here in Bina. When it comes to the sulfur, the same thing applies. It is the middle term of spirit and matter, so it's located in the center. Its finest emanation, its essence, is up here in Hakma. Now what that would look like, if we put those in, we can say that the essences are up here, the finest, most rarefied substances of spirit, of mercury, sulfur, and salt, and the most densest manifestation of these are down here, the sulfur, the mercury, and the salt. Now, if you are a very advanced person and adept, maybe you would be able to work with these energies, but they are so rarefied, so fine. So what we will do as spagyricists is really work with these three. But we will do this all by working down here, because the salt, which is the minerals of the plant, the essential oils, which carry the sulfur, and the alcohol, which carries the mercury, are the products we're working with, and they were reflected here. In other words, this is the essence, this is a demonstration, and this is the physical manifestation. There's 3 levels to this. Is that clear or somewhat confusing? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you. Is that clear, or does anybody have any questions or comments on that? So the point of this is that if we handle our alcohol and our essential oils and our minerals properly, and we purify them sufficiently, we can maintain and even enhance their energetic expression. Another example, if we take a seed, it has the potential for life and growth. If we take that seed and we put it in a microwave oven or we crack it in half, the growth of that plant can no longer be demonstrated or manifest through the seed. The seed is now an unfit vehicle. It's not that the spirit or the growth factor is left, it's just that it can't use that as a vehicle of expression because we damaged it. With the Spagyrics, the same thing applies. We're trying to work with these finer energies. In order to do that, we have to have a fit physical vehicle that will allow this energy to express itself in this dimension. If we damage the container, then these finer energies can't express through that container. Is that clear? The same applies in Spagyrics. The same analogy with the seed. We don't want to damage our products. We want to be able to have this finer energy expressed through what we're doing. Now, how do we do that? Say there's these three principles, mercury, sulfur, and salt, or the essential oils, the alcohol, and the salt. What do we do with them? How do we obtain them? Well, simply stated, we must select, separate, purify, and assemble. That's what we're going to do. Selection is very important. It's not only what plant you select, but what part of the plant you select. The separation and purification is we're getting rid of all the aggregate. We're getting all that stuff out of our way. And the last thing we want to do is once we do that, is now reassemble our product and then utilize it. Now when it comes to selection, what part of the plant do we use? Well, before we even get into that, I must tell you that I advocate picking and harvesting your own plants. We had a discussion a little earlier, a brief discussion. But that's extremely important. Quick story, very close to where I work, there is a produce farm. And they make a lot of produce for the markets. And I was driving by one day, and I noticed that across the street, uphill from where this produce, where they grow produce, is that they had it all roped off. And they had all this plastic all over the area. And it was contaminated. And they said that it was highly contaminated and didn't let anybody get near it. Yet across the street, downhill, down drainage from it, was a place that was selling produce to the local markets. I thought this pretty bizarre, but there was apparently, they said, well, we had our soil tested and they said it was clean enough. Clean enough. If you don't know where you're harvesting or where you're getting your supplies or your materials, you don't know what you're getting. If you grow them yourself, at least you have a better chance of knowing that you're getting a pretty decent product. Now, most of the herb suppliers are very reputable, and I'm not suggesting that they're next to contaminated lots, but you just never know. If you do it yourself, you know for sure. Now, there's a side benefit of growing or harvesting your own plants, and you can pick wild plants. You don't have to maintain a garden in your house. But by doing that, you get to see the plant through its whole life cycle. You see it when it first sprouts out of the ground. You see it as it starts to develop and goes through many different expressions throughout the season, and you see it when it withers and dies. You get intimately familiar with the plant. You get to know the plant on a one-on-one level. Besides that, you're constantly imbuing your energy to the plant, and it's imbuing its energy to you. You get to nurture the plant. You get to add a little compost, prune any dead leaves, water the plant. You're nurturing the plant. After all, this plant is going to make you a product. But the most important aspect of growing or harvesting your own plants is this. It allows you to harvest the part or parts you need and allows you to pick them at their peak of perfection. This is extremely important. I'd like to give you a quick life story of a plant, and I'll show you why this is so important. Basically, there are three main categories of plants. There are what are called annual plants, a plant that kind of grows in one season and dies, sort of like tomato plants. You plant them, and then they're not there next year unless the seeds went into the ground. Another plant would be a biannual plant. A biannual plant is a plant that grows up through the first year. It winters over, and then the next year it grows up again and it goes to seed. It lives for 2 years. And then there are perennials. Perennials are plants that come up every year from the same rootstock. They die off the top or they go into hibernation, so to speak, and they come back the next year. Well, I like to look at the common life of a biannual plant. We're going to take wild carrot, the tincture that I made before. Wild carrot, or it's also called Queen Anne's lace, is a plant that's a biannual. The first thing that happens is the seed goes into the ground, and about the summertime it sprouts. When it sprouts, something magical happens. The seed, which was dormant, life potential, all of a sudden turns on. It's as if somebody turns a switch on. The potential's in there already for that light bulb to go on, but once you turn the switch, the energy is now demonstrating itself, if it's not damaged. Once the energy starts to demonstrate through the seed, amazing things happen. First of all the proteins are broken down to amino acids. The carbohydrates are broken down to simple sugars. The fats are broken down to fatty acids. The vitamin and mineral content increase. All you're adding is air and water. You can sprout it without any soil. The vitamin and mineral content increase. There's no way of really explaining that. There's some kind of energy that is being released. They said some of the vitamin content can go up 400%. That's not a little bit. That's quite a bit. Well, the sprout turns on. The life force is now demonstrating itself through that vehicle of the seed. It sends down a taproot, and it sends out leaves. The life force right now is putting out its solar panels, trying to gather as much sunlight and air as it can, and the root is digging into the ground, trying to extract some nutrients out of the soil. As it starts to do this, the plant develops and grows. Its main emphasis is to get as many leaves as it can, so it can store and gather as much energy as possible. And what is it storing? It's storing sunlight, the fire, the secret fire. Because what is a plant? Any plant can burn. If it's burning, what's it burning? It's a concentrated all sunlight into its essence, and when you burn it, you're releasing all that concentrated sunlight in one big burst that we call fire. So the plant is storing this solar energy and other energies in there. And this leaf is pulling in all the energy, and it's storing it in the root. It's preparing to winter over. As this plant winters over, it needs a reserve. So it stores it in its root cellar, so to speak, in its roots. And it puts a lot of energy in the root, and the root starts to swell up and get much larger. It winters over, and in the next spring, the plant now has a jump start on everybody else because it has this big storehouse. It doesn't have to wait to develop roots and leaves. It has this big storehouse that it can put up a stem very quickly, much quicker than most plants, and it grows up very quick. It puts out some leaves to gather more energy, and then it goes for it's like a sprinter preparing, getting all ready for its contest. Now the contest is here. Now what it's going to do is send out flowers, these beautiful umbrella-like flowers. And when it sends out these flowers, all the energy is now in the flowers. The flowers now go to seed. The plant completed its life cycle, and it withers and dies. Now why is that so important? Depends what part of the plant you want to harvest. If you harvest the plant when the leaves are dead, obviously you're not getting the essence of the plant. If you harvest the leaves when it's flowering, all the energy is in the flower. It's not in the leaves. The leaves have served their purpose for the most part, and it's just kind of there, and they're doing their job. But the energy, the essence of the plant's energy is being expressed in the flower. So you harvest the flower. If you want the root, the best time to harvest the root is when the root is most active. And that's in the late fall before it winters over. So the energy is not uniformly distributed through the plant. It's constantly moving through the plant as the plant is growing. Now here's what's so important. It's said that many plants don't have much mercury and sulfur. And for the most part, that's true. There's not a lot of mercury and sulfur inside a plant, or a lot of essential oils and alcohol. But sometimes it may be that we're looking for it in the wrong place. And I'll give you an example. If you take Queen Anne's lace, the plant that we used just a moment ago in that glass of water, and you take the flowers, and you take the leaves, and you put them in a vat, and you try to ferment them, what you'll end up with is a bunch of rotting plants. There's not enough sugars in the leaves and the flowers to make a fermentation to generate any alcohol. That's because that's not where the mercury is hiding. The mercury of that plant, or the alcohol, is hiding in the root of the first-year root. So if you take the first-year root, and you take that root and you grind it up, and you ferment that, and I also put a little amylase in it. I'm not sure if you need that yet. I haven't gotten that far. But if you put amylase in there, the amylase is a digestive enzyme. It breaks the carbohydrate down into simple sugars. And now the plant ferments. And it can generate enough alcohol to make a tincture. This alcohol in here is totally from the wild carrot plant, or Queen Anne's lace, same name. the alcohol was hiding in a different part of the plant. A perfect analogy is if you were going to make wine, you wouldn't use the leaves and the vine, you'd use the grapes, because that's where the alcohol is hidden, in the sugars of the plant. The same thing applies to other plants. You have to find where the mercury is hiding if you want to get a lot of mercury. Mostly, the mercury hides in the fruit of a plant, a succulent, juicy fruit, what you normally think of when you think of a piece of fruit. It also likes to hide in root structures that winter over. So annuals live and die. There's not much in their roots. But biannuals and perennials usually will store energy as carbohydrate in the roots. And maybe that might be a good place to look for mercury where it hides. The same thing applies, in a way, with the sulfur or the essential oils of plants. And I'd like to share a story with you. I noticed one time I was harvesting yarrow, which is another favorite one of my plants. We were harvesting yarrow. I used to teach these outdoor programs, and we were doing a sweat lodge. And in a sweat lodge, you want to induce a sweat. You go into this hot room, the little shelter that you make, and you want to sweat. You can enhance that effect by taking certain herbs. Certain herbs act as a diaphoretic, and they open up your pores and induce you to sweat. Catnip is one, and yarrow is another. Well, we were harvesting yarrow, which grows wild where we were doing this, and I noticed this was at the end of a hot day. And I noticed the plants we were gathering in the shade had a much higher essential oil content, just by smelling it, crushing the leaves and smelling it, than the ones that were in the sun. I said, this is pretty unusual. The ones in the sun, the essential oils evaporated throughout the day. So we harvested the ones in the shade. They had more essential oil, and that's what we were looking for, because the volatile substance in the essential oil is what acts as a diaphoretic. So the next morning, after the sweat lodge, we got out of our shelters and we went about. And I wanted to make some more tea. And I went to harvest the yarrow, and I went to the ones in the shade because they had more essential oil. And they were about the same. I went out to the sun, the ones in the sun, and they had more essential oils than the one in the shade. I said, no, wait a minute. And it got me to think, and then it made perfect sense. The plants that are in the sun are being exercised constantly. During the daytime, they're losing their essential oils. At nighttime, they say, wow, that was a great workout. Now I'm going to build up my supply of essential oils again. And in the morning, they're vibrant with a lot of essential oil. They lose it throughout the day, and in anticipation of that, they build up more at night, and so on and so on. The plants in the shade were the couch potatoes. They didn't have to do anything. They weren't in the sun that strong, so they just hung out. They had some essential oil, but not to the same level that the ones were in the sun. So it's important to pick your plants at the right time of day also. I found the best time for the essential oils is at first thing in the morning. Right after, especially if you had a real hot day today, real hot baking day, and a nice cool night, and the next morning, the dew is on the plant, just burns off. As soon as the dew completely burns off, that's when the plant is at its peak with essential oil. The essential oil can hide anywhere in the plant. It depends on the plant, and the best indicator of where the essential oil is your nose. Take the leaf, take the fruit, take the seed, take the root, see where the strongest aromatic smell is, and that's what's highest in the essential oils. Now, what does all this come down to? If you went to an herb supplier and said, I need some wild carrot root that was picked on the first fall of that plant, and then I need some yarrow that was grown in the sun and picked in the morning that was after a hot day and a cool night, they're going to look at you like you're off your rocker. You can't pick the essences and the products you want unless you can control it, and you can't control it unless you're harvesting your own plants. In fact, they don't sell wild carrot roots in the store. So if you wanted to make this extract, this type of extract, your only chance of making it is to go out and pick your own wild carrot roots. Point I'd like to make is by picking your own plants, you also form a symbiotic relationship with them. And I know this might sound a little far-fetched. I've worked a lot of years with plants on a very intimate basis, and I consider them my friends. And I know that might sound corny, but I sincerely say that and mean it. I used plants to feed myself, and I'm not talking about a garden. I'm talking about wild edible plants. I went out and harvested every couple of days, and I walked through a certain path in an area that I harvest from, and I watched these plants grow, and they felt like they were my little children. And I worked with them. And I like to tell you what I mean by that, because I think this is an important attitude to have. There's one plant, I like a lot of plants. One plant is called lamb's quarter. It's a really healthy, nutritious plant. It's vibrant, it's full of energy. And if I would walk by and see a lamb's quarter and I ripped it out of the ground, I just killed the plant. And I got one small meal. End of story. However, if I walk by that plant now, and instead of ripping it out of the ground, I just pinch off the top, the part that's growing the most. That's where the energy is. So I pinch off the top. I'm getting the most vibrant part of the plant, number one, and I didn't kill the plant. Then the plant adapts to that. And what it does is it bifurcates, and it forms two tops. So next time I come walking by, I pick, instead of one plant that I ripped out of the ground, I only picked a smaller bud part. Now I pick 4 buds, or 2 buds, I'm sorry. And then that will bifurcate, and next time I come in, it geometrically progresses, and what would normally be maybe a single plant now turns into this huge shrub. Now, the other kicker is this. In the fall, the seeds are also have a lot of nutritional value. Instead of the plant producing maybe 5,000 seeds, it turned into a shrub. It might produce 200,000 seeds now. So I helped the plant, and it helped me. It fed me through the whole year rather than one quick meal. And number two, I helped it because its purpose is one of its purposes is to reproduce. And if it reproduces maybe 5,000 seeds, and I help it to produce a couple 100,000 seeds, I helped it. So we helped each other. It's nice to work with plants with that kind of symbiotic relationship. Now, I know that seems like we're getting off the trail of spagyrics a little, and we're going to really dive into the lab work in a minute. But I just want to make a point. The whole spagyric process is a spiritual one of harmony and one with working with nature. If you start off with the I don't care attitude or it doesn't matter attitude, that affects your work also. Remember, your content of your consciousness affects your work. All right, let's say you pick your plants fresh, or let's say you harvest them in your garden, whatever the case may be. You have a couple of options. If you're using the plants fresh, that's no problem. You just use them right away in the lab. If not, what are your options? What if you're going to say, well, now's the time to pick it. I don't have the time to process it. You have 2 options. One is freezing and one is drying. Freezing maintains the maximum potency of the plant, and it has some advantages in oil separation, which we'll explain in a little bit. However, plants can get freezer burn, and long-term storage is not ideal in my opinion. Drying has better long-term storage, and it has certain advantages for making tinctures because you don't want a lot of moisture in the plant. And if you dry the plant out, you eliminated a lot of the moisture, so you can make a stronger tincture with a dried plant. If you're drying, there's a few guidelines I'll just mention very briefly. Number 1, you should dry in the shade. If you dry it in the sun, you can lose a lot of the essential oils. You want to dry it as quick as possible, but with not too much heat. If you take a long time to dry it, it's constantly evaporating out essential oils. You don't want to lose essential oils. They're rare enough to begin with. The more you lose, the less you're going to have when you separate it. You don't want too much heat. Too much heat will, again, evaporate the essential oils out. And you don't want to over-dry them. If you over-dry them, you kind of start, it's almost like cooking them a little bit. You don't want to put them in the oven. Some people suggest put them in the oven at a low temperature. Well, that's cooking. That's not drying. You have to be really careful with that. You want to store them in airtight containers, but you must make sure that they're dry enough. If there's a little bit of moisture in there, they can mold up. And another important thing is, whether you're freezing or drying, is to always make sure you label and date them. Sometimes you'll take a plant out, oh yeah, I have some of that, and you look at the date and you go, God, this is 5 years old. Oh my God, this is a little too old. And what I also like to do with plants is this. When I go out and harvest, I like to offer something back to the plants. Might sound a little corny again, but I think it's important. If you're out there harvesting the plant and you're about to harvest the root, if I need Queen Anne's lace root, I'm going to kill the plant. I also might have Queen Anne seeds. I gathered a lot of them because I also use the seeds for the essential oils. Because the essential oil is hiding in the seeds, the alcohol is hiding in the roots. You have to pick different parts of the plant depending on what you're looking for. So I might have some old seeds that I don't need anymore. And when I go out to harvest the root, I cast out the seeds. The seeds will still sprout and grow. So the plant, the relationship I built with the plant is, the plant will continue. I casted out some seeds, and in honor of it giving up its roots to me. It's a nice relationship to get rid of your old plants rather than toss them in the garbage. Next time you go out and harvest, put them back to nature. Give them back to nature as compost, as an offering to the plant. Okay, at this point, what I'd like to do is talk about how do we process the herbs. This is really the heart of the lab work. This is what we're going to be doing tomorrow. Now, I don't want this to scare you. This is, well, first of all, how many people here, raise your hands, have worked with spagyric products or know how to do it pretty comfortably? So a lot of new people? Okay. I don't want this to scare you. This is going to look like a pretty big process. But let's see what it really involves. It's not as bad as it looks. Oh my God, I'll be there forever. Well, basically, we could break it in. The products that we need are the ones in the circles. And there's 4 products that we want to come up with. 2 of them are actually the same. They're both, these 2 down here are water-soluble minerals. So what we're doing, if we break it into components, let's look at what we have to do just to get this first component, the essential oil. Basically, all we're doing is we're taking an herb, we're adding some water to it, and we're going to put it through an oil separation. What is an oil separation? You'll see tomorrow. But I won't get into that much detail. I'll also show you a slide of what an oil separator looks like so you can see what the process is. But for now, what we want to do is understand what we're doing, not how to do it. So the first part is very simple. Water, herb, put it through the oil separator, we have essential oil. First part is done. Not too bad. Now, what's the second part? The next thing we want to do is get it over here. So we take the remaining liquid in plant matter, because we took the essential oils out. We're going to add to it, and we have some variations here, but for the most part we're going to add some water, some sugar, and some yeast. What we're going to do is ferment the plant. Now if you pick the right parts of the plant, you may not have to add any sugar. If you pick the right parts of the plant, you may not have to add any yeast. But for some of them you may have to, or if you're buying your plants from a herb supplier and you only get Queen Anne's lace leaves and flowers, and you want to make a product, you're going to have to add some sugar. And it's not a problem, as we'll explain tomorrow. So you're going to take the remaining plant matter, add some water, sugar, and yeast, and you're going to do a fermentation. Not much to do other than mix it together and walk away. You have to watch it a little bit, but it kind of does it itself. Remember, we're facilitators. Once it ferments, now we're going to do is separate what fermented from the solid plant matter. So we pour off the liquid, press out as much of it as we can, and we put the liquid on one side and the plant matter on the other side. Now what do? We take the liquid and we put it through a distillation setup, some chemical labware. We distill the alcohol over. Now we have 2 of our components. Now once we distill it, we took the alcohol over and we still have a liquid that remains. Well, we take this liquid, we evaporate it, we put it on a stove and we boil it. And as it boils, it reduces down. We boil the water off. What is left is this gooey substance. Looks like honey. We take that substance, and when it gets pretty thick, we pour it in a plate to dry it out, which I'll show you a slide in a moment. And we keep reducing it down until we drive all the moisture off, and what's left is this solid matter. Now we incinerate it. By incinerating it, we burn off all the carbon. And all that's left are ashes, like a gray-colored ash. We take these ashes and we put them through a process where we extract the water-soluble minerals out. When we take the water-soluble minerals out, we take those and discard the other stuff. This is the only thing that we're really discarding. And you could incorporate them in, but I think it's best to leave them out. These are mostly carbonates, and they're really not needed in the product that we're making. We put this through this process, and we take out the water-soluble minerals as a liquid. We take that a liquid, we evaporate it down until it's dry powder. We take that powder, and we keep doing this until we get pure white powder. We calcine it, rehydrate it, and so on. I'll explain this a little bit more. I just want to go through this quickly. And then we have these water-soluble minerals. On the other side, we take this dried plant matter, we calcinate it, and we do basically the same exact thing here. If you look from here down, this and this are identical. So it's the same process, it's just on both sides because we're doing it with 2 different parts of the product. So in summary, the first thing we're doing is this oil separation, step 1. Second thing we're doing is we're doing a fermentation and we're distilling off the alcohol. Step 2. Step 3, we're taking the remaining liquid and we're evaporating it and burning it and ending up with a dry water-soluble salt. You don't feel like you have to copy this down, we'll give you a handout for this. And over here we're taking the plant and we're doing the same thing. We're calcinating it, we're extracting the water-soluble minerals, and we're taking those minerals down into a powder, and we're bringing them down here. That's the process in a nutshell. We're going to go through it a little bit slower with the slides so you can actually see it so it makes more sense. Now that is a more elaborate way. This is called a complete separation. What we're doing is we're breaking the plant down into its 3 main components. And I'm looking for another chart here. Sure. Yes, in fact, if a plant, and I'm not suggesting this, but if you picked a plant along the roadside, and let's say you picked up some heavy metals, such as lead from leaded gasoline or camdium or mercury or anything, that gets discarded here. So you're actually, the insoluble minerals are usually the heavy metals and the things that are really not that good to consume anyway. We're purifying the plant, remember. We're not just concentrating the whole essence of the plant. We're concentrating certain components of the plant. We're getting rid of the dross, the aggregate, the stuff we do not need anymore. Again, this may look complicated, but it's really not as bad when you actually see the process. We'll be doing this tomorrow afternoon. Now, some plants don't have that much essential oil, and you can't do an oil separation. If you try, you'll get very little, if any, essential oil. So what do? Well, all you do is you eliminate this first step, and you start right here. You just start with the plant, you add water and yeast, and you continue the rest of the process, and it works. And you can do that for every plant if you have the right equipment. If you do this, what happens is the alcohol acts as an extractant, and it mixes with the essential oil, and you're pulling the essential oil and the mercury over together. So instead of having alcohol, you'll have alcohol and the essential oil. By eliminating this step, the essential oil comes together with the alcohol down here. Again, we'll go through this process again with the slide. Now I want to show you one other system or method. This one looks much more tolerable, easier. In this case, it looks a lot simpler. What we're doing in this case is we're taking an herb. We're already adding an alcohol. We're going to use alcohol as our extractant. We take the alcohol, place it on the herb, and we circulate it. In other words, we let it sit for a certain amount of time. The alcohol works on the plant and extracts certain principles out of it. It extracts the essential oils. We're pouring off the alcohol again. Remember before I said that the mercury, or the alcohol, manifests through the alcohol, and the alcohol is universal in the plant kingdom. All plants will generate an alcohol. So what we're doing is taking that alcohol. It's universal in the plant kingdom. We're borrowing an alcohol from another plant. We can use an alcohol we distill off of grapes, grape alcohol. We could use grain alcohol that you buy in the store. You could use from sugar cane, which is 151 rum, from potatoes, which is vodka. You could take any one of these alcohols and use it as an extractant on the plant. Once you leave it circulate for a while, you drain off the alcohol, and you put that to the side. You take the plant remains. Now, this is basically what happens in the health food store variety that you buy. We're going to kick it up an extra notch. We're taking the remains of the plant, and we're going to incinerate them, just like we did here. The process is exactly the same. We incinerate them, we turn them to ashes. We take the ashes and we wash the water-soluble salts out. We cast off the stuff that's insoluble. We take the water-soluble salts, and now they're in liquid. We evaporate it down to a powder. We take that powder and we want to purify it even more. So we incinerate it. We calcinate it again. In doing that, we burn off even more stuff that we might have missed the first time. When we do that, we rehydrate it, we filter it, and we do it again. And we keep doing this process until the minerals come out pure white. They look like cleaner than snow. As pure white as you can get them. And they're very purified. We got rid of all the junk. Now we take these components and we're going to add them. We recombine them together. Now what I'd like to do at this point is go through some slides and go through the process a little bit again. but show you pictures of it rather than just describing it. All right, let me just see how we look here. Okay, the first step that we had, actually you're supposed to have a handout, but we don't have it, but that's okay. You'll have it tomorrow. The first step I said that we get water. There's lots of different kinds of water. We could use regular tap water. We could use distilled water, or we could use rainwater. There's certain advantages to rainwater, and we'll discuss that later. This is my backyard and my fancy rain catcher, which is nothing more than a tarp that I strung between my house and a couple of poles that I stick in the ground. And this catches the rainwater. The rainwater catches inside of here, comes down through a funnel into a jug. I have a couple of pictures of this just to show you if you wanted to catch some rainwater, if you get into spagyrics or alchemy, it has certain advantages. One thing you want to make sure is that you don't have any metal touching the water. The water, ideally, you'd like to try to catch during a thunderstorm. It has a certain essence of fire or niter. There's actually, you can measure the difference of regular water and rainwater during a thunderstorm. There's more niter content or nitrogen within the water. Just another picture. This is a top view. The water comes in. All I did was put a hole in the center of the tarp, and I stuck two funnels together, one on top and one on the bottom, and I sandwiched the tarp between them and punched out the center and strung it up. It's pretty simple to do, and it worked real well. And then the funnel sticks in the jar, and I just made a little gizmo to hold it down, and you'd be amazed at how much water you collect in a very short amount of time. Just one thing, to tie the ends of the tarps, you put a little pebble in the tarp, and you just wrap some cord around it. And I have these little quick clips. I could set this thing up in a matter of seconds. I just keep it in a canvas bag. Don't put it in a plastic bag, because if it's a little wet, it'll get mildewy and you're introducing contamination. I put it in a little canvas bag, and I have it tucked in the closet. If there's a big thunderstorm coming out and I need some water, I can hook this thing up in a matter of seconds. Okay, now this, we have to raise that up a little bit. Might seem intimidating if you've never been in a lab before. You don't have to get this elaborate, but I want to show you where you can take it, or at least where I've taken it. You could probably take it further than this. This is an oil separation system. We're going to be doing this tomorrow, but on a little bit different basis. But I'll show you what I do. You don't need a heating mantle, and we're going to talk about a simpler way of doing this whole process with practically no expense. Practically everything you need, you already have at home, and I'll show you how to do that. But I'd like to show you both sides of the process. Down here is a heating mantle, and there's a flask which we would fill with rainwater or distilled water. And here is another flask that attaches to this one. This is where I would put plant matter that I want to extract essential oil out of. What happens is the water boils up here, the steam comes through this tube and hits the plant matter. The steam is hotter than water. Water only hits 212 degrees and it vaporizes, but the vapor can go even hotter. The vapor is coming up through the plant matter, and the vapor, the hot steam, is evaporating the essential oils. As the essential oils evaporate, they come up here, through this tube, up into this condenser. This condenser cools them off. When they cool off, they solidify, or they condense. Just like when you see dew on your car in the morning, the cold metal condenses the liquid. As it condenses, it drips down into this tube, and you get water, and the essential oil floats on water, floats on the top. And the water siphons back here, and I'll show you that in another picture in a moment. But a couple of things I want to point. Again, this is an elaborate setup. This is a small flask. And I use this basically just to find essential oil in a plant. And I do different tests. I see this plant has a lot of essential oil in the leaves. Well, how about the root? Or what about the seeds? And I find out where it is. Rather than gather a tremendous amount, it's a small volume. It's only about 1 liter. So I use this to test for essential oil. I found it also helpful to do it under vacuum, and I'll explain that a little bit later. So this is an essential oil setup. Anytime you boil any kind of water, remember we have to put water in that lower flask, you have to put something in the water to prevent it from bumping. What's bumping? When you boil water, do you ever notice water in a teapot? All of a sudden bubbles will just shoot up. You put these little chips in. There's different kinds. You could have little boiling beads, or I kind of prefer these. And what happens is it gives something for bubbles to form on in the water. And it makes the boiling of the water much more controlled and much more smooth. Rather than the bubble rapidly and bubbles bursting and kicking a lot of moisture in the air, the boiling is very subtle. This is my main essential oil extraction. And again, I don't want to scare you with this, but I want to show you where I've taken this, and we'll go from there. This is a much larger setup. Down here is the same exact thing that I just showed you, but we'll take close up and show you how this works. But this is the overall view of it. On the bottom, we have a flask. We put water, again, the rainwater that we collected. We put some boiling chips in here, so the water boils very smoothly. Up in here is where we put our plant matter. Now, you're going to say, well, what's this white thing? This white thing, there's a big hole here. The plants would fall right through into the water. Well, I just want steam to hit the plants, not water. So I put a mesh bag, which I'll show you on this next picture, I believe. And all it is a nylon bag, and I put inside of it fiberglass wool. This is the kind of fiberglass, this is from a chemical supply house, but you can buy the same stuff I think they put in fish filters for an aquarium. It's just a fiberglass, it's glass, but it's made into a shape of wool. I put that inside the bag, and I use it as a screen, so the steam could still boil through, but the plants can't fall through. This is the oil separator I told you about. The steam and the essential oil comes up through this tube, hits the thermometer. The steam has nowhere to go. It fills up in here, and it comes up to this way, goes up to the condenser, and drips down into this little receiver. What happens, the way this receiver is built, this fills up with water. The essential oil floats on the top. What's nice about this system is you can leave it running, and basically, you wouldn't, but you could walk away from it. Because what happens is, you don't have to worry about this overflowing. This little tube is a siphon tube. Water always seeks its own level. So as this drips up, both of these, I don't know how I can show you this, water drips up and fills in here. When it gets to this level, the water drips back down in. So you never run out of water. So the water keeps dripping back in, the essential oil keeps building up here. Now you're not going to fill this whole thing with essential oil, or if you do, tell me what plant you're using. You're only going to get a little bit, but you can do this several times, or you can use whatever, depends how much you get, and you use what you get. The top of the condenser, here's the bottom, the top of the oil extractor, and here's the condenser that I was using. I like to run things under a vacuum, and there's a good reason. By running it under a vacuum, you're doing it at a lower temperature. You're volatilizing, you're lowering the boiler pressure, the boiling point of the water, so you say, well, I'm getting less heat. Well, that's true, but the essential oils are also coming over at a lower temperature because they will now boil at a lower temperature under a vacuum. So by using a vacuum system, you can catch your product and not damage it. Remember the analogy I gave you before? If you have that seed, you put it in the microwave oven or in your oven and try to plant it, it may not grow. You don't want to subject your products or mercury or sulfur or salt, which again is the essential oils, the alcohol, and the minerals of the plant. You don't want to subject them to things that are going to degrade them or destroy them. This is the little thing that I made that works beautifully. What I do is I just hook the end of my system up to this, and it measures how much of a vacuum I have. If I need more vacuum, I open up this ball valve, and I have a little hand pump, which I'll show you in the next slide, and I pump in the vacuum I want. When I get it to the vacuum level I want, I shut this off, and I take my vacuum pump off, and I just watch this needle. I usually run between 20 and 25 inches of mercury, which this is gauged in or calibrated in. And I usually like to run in here, and I run this system that way. This is the hand pump that I was talking about. There's a little cord, a little hose goes onto here, and I attach it onto the top of the condenser, and I create the vacuum. It's another picture of the gauge. It also has a little gauge on it, and that's the hand pump. This is the whole setup again, so let's just review. We have our water down here. We put our plant in here. It can't fall through because we have the bag. The steam comes up through the oil separator, condenses, and drips back down. We collect the essential oil. We're doing it under a vacuum. It's attached to the top of the condenser. And here's where that pump goes on to pump up or remove the air from the system.
I would recommend the bag, I noticed that it was fiberglass wool. What was the bag made out of?
This is the nylon mesh bag. Now, what happens after you do this oil extraction? You can do it a couple of times. It's amazing. You can do it one time and you run it and you don't see any other things happening. You don't have to break this system down. The water is all contained in there, and it keeps recycling the water and recycling the water, recycling the water. You never have to add more water to it because it's a closed system. But what happens after you let the plant sit a while, the plant kind of opens up a little bit. And when it opens up again, you can run run the whole system again. And you can do this sometimes 2, 3, 4 times. And you'll still pull out a little bit less each time, but you'll still pull out some essential oil. What I do right before I finish, when I'm all done, I sometimes break down the top, I take the plant matter out, and I grind it up. The reason I grind it up is I'm opening it more surface area, especially if you're using seeds. A lot of seeds are aromatic and have a high essential oil content, and if you grind them up, and this is a Japanese grinding bowl, it's quite big. It's about this big around. I put I can't fit all of it, depending on how much I do, but I put some of it in there. I grind up the matter and open it up more. I put it back in and run this system one more time. Okay, now, that was essential oil extraction. Now we take what's left. We have our essential oil. We put that to the side. We're done with the essential oil for now. The next thing we want to do is ferment what's left. If our plant does not have that much essential oil, remember I said we could just eliminate that first step and start with fermentation? That's what we're doing here. This is dried plant matter. We're putting it in a container. I had already mixed up some sugar and some water. I'm going to pour this liquid on the plant matter and let it rehydrate. I put this little plate, it's a plastic plate with some holes drilled in it, on top of the plant matter, and I use this cylinder just to hold it down. Because what happens when it ferments, it creates carbon dioxide bubbles. The bubbles attach to the little pieces of plant matter, and the plant matter floats to the top. Well, now it's not fermenting in the water anymore, it's on top of the water. So you want to keep pushing that down, or ideally, hold it underneath the surface of the water. This is the setup all set to go, and actually after it has fermented a while. Remember, label all your things so you know when you started and what you have in there, because sometimes if you're doing more than one thing, you may forget. But you can see the extraction that's taking place, the color of the liquid is darkened, and all of this is fermenting. You'll see bubbles. You can't really see it in here, but there's a bunch of bubbles that will keep bubbling up through this thing. When the bubbles stop, the fermentation is done for the most part. And now, here's some other fermentation jars. This one is quite big. This is over 5 gallons. You can tell by the height of the shelf, the 4-liter beaker I had before was only about this big, 5-liter beaker. And just any jar you can find that's big enough to put how much plant you want to ferment in there. The other thing you could do, if you want to speed the fermentation process, if you do it in the summertime, you can just leave it in wherever your lab is or wherever you're doing this, in your kitchen, in your basement. If you're doing it in the wintertime, my basement gets kind of cold. So I created a box, and I put it inside of there. There's a heating pad on the bottom. I could put several jars in here and keep them at a certain temperature. There's a little thermometer on the top. This is the inside of the box. I have it insulated to hold heat in. It doesn't get very hot in here. It's just kind of warm. The bottom of the box is basically a heating pad. I have some, in the building supply, they have this material. It's like, I forgot what they call it, Wonder Board. It's a masonry material. It holds a lot of heat in, and it's fireproof. So I put that on the bottom. I just put a screen on the top there, and I set whatever jars I want in there to keep them at a certain temperature. When you're done, and the plant is finished fermenting, you pour off the liquid. Take the liquid out here. What I'm holding here, as you'll see in the next picture, is just a little, like a spaghetti screen. You can find great alchemical supplies in the kitchen area of your supermarket. This is what I was using, just to pour the liquid out. Other thing that I've used in the past was this little stainless steel presser, which works great. The only thing is I've been getting away from metal. For some reason, I don't like using metal to touch anything that's spagyrically processed. I think the metal discharges a certain quality or a certain energetic portion of the product, so I stay away from metal, but I used to use this. Another alternative is just to use colanders. You can put one colander in, pour all the plant matter in there, and put another colander on the top and crush it down. Or just take a colander and press with a flask or something and press all the liquid out. I'm kind of a fanatic, if you haven't guessed that, and I create, other thing. Before I went to, I used to use metal. If you don't mind using metal, this is a great tool. You could put plant matter through here. It's a wheatgrass juicer. You could actually juice anything, and it'll take the juice of the plant out. If you run the plant matter through here, it'll extract all the juice out of here, and what comes out of here is almost dried plant matter. And so you can almost calcinate it at this point. It's not even wet. It really dries it out pretty good. And a couple of days more, and it's totally dry. Being the fanatic that I am, I created my own little press that's all no metal. This is a part of it. Here's some plant matter that I was about to press. It has a plastic PVC top and a plastic PVC bottom with a little hole in it. And I'll show you what it looks like without it set up as much. It was just a metal can with a cap, and the cap went down like this. And then there's a little elbow that goes down to this tube. And this is a plate that goes inside there so the plants don't get crushed into the hole. This is a top view. Here's the hole. If I just put in without that plate, this gets clogged up. This plate just acts as a little screen so the juices can get pressed in through here. And this is it in use again. I have this crank, and I just push down, and it squishes all the juice out, and I can get it really dry, and no metal is touching the product at all, which I kind of like. Once you separate the plant matter from the liquid, now you have two things. The plant matter you want to dry out, and the liquid. You could process it or distill it immediately, but if you don't have the time or you want to wait a while, you treat it just like wine. This is a mason jar that I was able to get a little hole in the lid, and I put this fermentation cap on. I fill it up as much as possible. You don't want it to oxidize. If too much it's just like winemaking. If you put the wine in here that you made, and you leave a big air gap, you can start to generate vinegar. You don't want vinegar, you want the alcohol. The alcohol will decompose into vinegar. So you want to fill this up as much as possible, just a little air space at the top. And you want it still will ferment a little bit and release gas. If I didn't have this on and I just sealed it airtight, it's going to build up pressure. It could even explode or blow a gasket out or leak or do something. This allows it to vent out the air. You fill this in with a little bit of water. So you can store these wines, and you could have chamomile wine and dandelion wine, all these different kind of wines, and you can drink them too if you want, but you can long-term storage if you want to. The plant matter we dry out. You can put it out on trays. You can put it out in the sun. You're not worried about destroying anything in the sun because we're about to incinerate this in even a stronger sun, which is the fire. So you dry out the plant matter. When the plant matter is, you can even do it when it's wet, but I prefer to dry it. It smokes less. If you ever burn something wet, it smolders a lot. If you dry it out and then you want to calcine it, you want to actually incinerate it and turn it into ashes. To do this, I use an outdoor stove. This makes a decent amount of smoke. What I found, although you can't see it in this, for some reason, all the pictures I took that had flame, none of the flames appeared in the pictures. But this stove is a pretty amazing stove. Russ has something very similar. We'll be using it tomorrow. The flames kick out of this thing. This bowl is about this big around. And the flames come out of this thing and whip up the side and actually act as an afterburner and ignite the smoke. Because this smoke is volatile. And it acts as an afterburner and immediately minimizes the amount of smoke you get. This is a calcination, and there's a decent amount of plant matter in here. I like to put a handful in at a time. I put a lid on, and most of the smoke shoots out one side because the lid's canted a little bit. And the flames come up and ignite the smoke, and sometimes you'll see flames shooting up as this high, but it smokes a lot less. After we incinerate it, we have ashes. We want to take the water-soluble salts out and throw away all the other stuff, the insoluble salts, the stuff that might contain heavy metals and impurities and aggregates, stuff we don't need. Again, don't let this intimidate you. We're going to show you a quick and easy way, and we're also going to show you a little bit more elaborate way. These are called sock slit extractors, and there's two different sizes here. And basically what we do is we put water down in the bottom with a couple of boiling stones. We want a nice smooth boiling. The water comes up sort of like we had before. The vapor comes up, goes through this tube, comes up through here, it condenses, turns back to a liquid. As it turns back to a liquid, it drops. It's still very hot. It drops on the plant, which we have the ashes of the plant, which we have put in this coffee filter. And what happens is the water, which is distilled, is almost magnetic. It's not saturated with any other substance. It's distilled water, and it's making a tea. And it makes a tea with this, and then the tea water will siphon back. There's a little siphon in here. This will make a lot more sense tomorrow to see it rather than trying to explain it. The water siphons back in here, and it's distilled again. You're constantly imbuing this with distilled water. If you make tea, and you put a tea bag in your water, it only gets so strong, you can't concentrate it anymore. If you take that same tea bag, and you put it in a new fresh of hot water, it still extracts some more stuff out. If you put it in another cup of hot water, it'll extract some more stuff out. That one cup couldn't extract it all. The same thing is happening here. This fills up with distilled water. There's nothing in the water but distilled, it's just pure water. It extracts some stuff out of this and dumps back in and starts all over again. It's constantly using water, but it's using the same water over and over. The material down here gets very dark and very concentrated, and we're really extracting all the water-soluble minerals out of the salt. I have two different sizes because sometimes when you're using, remember there was two calcinations on that chart I showed you? There was one on this side and one on this side. If you recall, we don't have the chart up right now, but one will generate a lot more salt than the other. So for the higher volume salt, I use a larger system. We take the liquid that's in that flask, and we want to concentrate it. We might have a decent amount of liquid. Now what we're going to do is boil it. And we're going to keep boiling it and boiling it and boiling it until we reduce the volume down pretty much. It'll get a little darker as it does that. When we get to this level, I like to pour it out. If I reduce it any more than this, in fact, this you can't even see it on this beaker. I kind of use the same beakers for this over and over. What happens is that this water-soluble salts are an alkaline, and they're very strong, and they can actually etch glass. And you'll see that tomorrow also. So I don't want to destroy my beaker. So at this point, and it's harder to get the salts out of this, at this point I take this liquid, I pour it in a pie plate. This is a different salt, and it's not focused, but that's as good as it's going to get. And I put it on a flat pie plate, and I turn the heat up gently, and I continue to evaporate it. What's nice about evaporating it that way is you have a higher surface area. If I try to boil water and the neck of the bottle is only this big, say an 1 inch square circumference, I can only get a little bit of evaporation going. If I have a big plate like this, I have so much surface area, it evaporates quicker. You can see this plate. What happens is I said the salts condense. Well, here's what's happening. See these little chunks? They start to form in the liquid. You start to see minerals start to build up. You continue to evaporate it until you get a very small amount of water. At that point, you could leave it on this burner and just turn this into a white bunch of salts. But what I prefer to do is evaporate it with a light. We're not going to do this tomorrow because it takes too much time. But I think this gives you a little bit better product. The reason being, well, it saves glassware, really, is what it does. It evaporates the salts and it doesn't destroy your glassware as much. If you heat it up until they're all gone, it really etches the glass pretty severely. So I evaporate the rest with the heat lamp. When you do that, what you end up with are your dried salts, and that's what it looks like. And you scrape this. This is the only place I really kind of still use metal, and I'm even getting away from this. I have a porcelain spoon and a porcelain spatula. I didn't have them for the picture here, because this is actually an older picture. But I still use metal for this. This is the only thing I still use metal for. But for the essential oils and for the alcohol, I don't like metal to touch them at all. So you scrape all the salt together, and when you get it all together, you're going to calcinate it. I just use a regular little burner and a crucible, and I put some heat on it. I stir it up with a glass rod, and I keep stirring it and heating it until I burn off as much as I can. You'll get a feel for this tomorrow. When it's done, I dump it in here, and I grind it back into a powder. I rehydrate it by adding some distilled water, or rainwater or distilled water. I prefer distilled water, distilled rainwater. And I take this and I filter it. By filtering it, I remove all the impurities that I got when I burned it. When you burn it, you get little bits of carbon and junk and whatever, and the filter paper takes it out, and what you get is a liquid. You take that liquid, You do the same thing again. This is that thing where I said you keep repeating it. You take the liquid, you boil it down to a smaller volume, you put it on the plate, you evaporate it down. I prefer the heat lamp at the end, and you get the salts again. You scrape these down again, and you continue to do that until the salts come out as pure white as can be, like fresh snow. Here's the same cycle again. Now we're going to calcinate it again. You may notice that I'm using a smaller Bunsen burner. The salts, as they become purer, become much more sensitive to heat. And you can actually heat them so hot that they'll fuse together and melt. You don't really want to take them that far, because at that point, you may be destroying the very essence you're trying to catch. It's just like the seed. I said if you put it in a microwave, you destroy it. Although salts can tolerate tremendous amount of heat, there is a limit to anything. If you give it too much heat, you'll destroy the container, and then that essence of salt cannot manifest through that container anymore. Just like if I damage the seed, the life force cannot manifest through that seed anymore. So we calcinate it again, and we continue this cycle. Eventually, and this is a really poor picture, but it's the best I can take, these were 3 different types of salts. This was in the first, a rough one purification, and it got cleaner and cleaner, although you can't see it. This is a really pure white. The flash kind of obliterated the whole thing, but there's different grades of salts, and I usually put them in an airtight container because they are hygroscopic, and they'll absorb moisture out of the air, and they will liquefy again. So they should be in an airtight container. That was what we did with the plant matter. On the other side, we took off their wine. Remember we stored it in our jug as a temporary storage vehicle? Well, now we're going to distill it. We put it in a container. We put some boiling chips in again. We have a thermometer to measure the temperature, and we're going to distill over the alcohol. The alcohol comes over, regardless of the color here, the alcohol comes over pure, clear alcohol. Now, there are more elaborate systems of distillation, and I'll show you a couple a little later on. But I found that this to work the best. I have another system that I use for distilling, and I found that although I get a purer alcohol, I lose some of the essential oils. Because the essential oils, you want to get as much of the essential oils as you can out of this. So this type of distillation I found to be the best. We'll leave it at that. And I like to run these under a vacuum. Again, between 20 and 25 inches of mercury is what I usually like. This is the little hand pump that I mentioned to you. Just hook it on there. I open it up, get it to the level I want, close it off, and then I take off the hand pump. Again, just to show you some options. This is a system that I actually had made from a glass company. I don't like to use heat. That's why I use a vacuum. If you really get into this, here's a thought that you may want to think about in the future. What I have here is a flask on the bottom, and I can put water, wine, whatever you want to distill in here. And it has a very large neck. Now remember I said when you put liquid in a big flat pie plate, you have more surface area, there's more evaporation. If I had a very small, narrow mouth on the container, only a little bit of steam could escape at a time. This has a very large mouth, so I can put this temperature so low that it's body temperature. And what happens is there's evaporation. If I put a plate of water out here and came back a week later, the water will evaporate. But what's happening here, very little heat. This mantle is as low as it goes. Very little heat. Whatever's in here evaporates. As it evaporates, it comes up to this area and it condenses because it's a little bit cooler than this. As it condenses, it drips down and collects in here. If I run this under a vacuum, and this is at 25 inches of mercury, I have this sealed up really tight, and there's only 2 joints on this thing, 3 joints. I had it sealed really tight. It holds the vacuum quite long. If I come back a couple days later, it might be dropped down, and all I do is open it up and I crank the vacuum up. The vacuum lowers the boiling or evaporation point, and I can pull stuff over at body temperature if I wanted to. It just takes a while. This is something you could think of down the road, or if you're already there, it's an idea that you may want to explore. Okay, we distill off our wine. We distill the alcohol off of the wine that we made. Now what's left is that colored liquid that's in that big flask. We take that liquid and we continue to distill it. It's nice to save some of that water. It has some advantages for purifying the salts. I prefer not to use it, and there's a reason which I'll explain tomorrow. I usually use distilled rainwater. But what I take is I boil as much as I can until I can fit it in the beaker, and then I take this liquid and I continue to do the same thing. I evaporate it. As it evaporates, the liquid is only over here. It gets so thick, like honey, it starts to boil and foam up. If I keep going at this rate, it will actually overflow with foam. So I take it down as low as I can, and at that point, this is actually from wine. This is not from that plant. This is the remains from wine. I put it in a pie plate, and I evaporate it with a burner. When it gets thick enough, I finish evaporation with a heating lamp. It's even more important that I finish with a heating lamp in this case, because if you don't and you try to do it just on your stove, it will smoke and stink your whole house up. So you evaporate it, at least you don't burn anything and you don't get all the smoke release, because this stuff can't ignite. In fact, that's the next step. When we get it thick enough, we scrape it all up. It's like a thick, gooey molasses, even thicker than molasses honey. You scrape up as much of it as you can, and you do the same thing. You put it outside and you calcinate it. And you go, here we go again with the calcination. You're going to reduce this to a ash, and you're going to go through that same process of washing the ashes. We run it through the sock slit again. This is another distillation, and we're going to shift gears for a minute. I want to show you a couple other things that are important. Remember the second way I said is much easier to produce. It's a simpler process. Well, that simpler process, you need a wine, you need an alcohol to start with. You can go to the store and you can just buy any old wine any alcohol you like Everclear, vodka, or whatever the case may be. Or you can make your own. If you have some lab equipment, I lost my mic, so excuse me while I fidget here. You can make your own alcohol. This is a setup that actually Russ told me about, and I love this setup. It's a way of distilling alcohol, if you do it under a vacuum, of distilling alcohol and get a very pure alcohol with maybe 1 or 2 distillations. What I don't like about this is I was using this to make my spagyric extracts. And what I found is that this refluxes. This will take the water and alcohol kind of come over together, but mostly alcohol. Some of the water will expand in here and kind of drip back down. A little water gets by here, and it'll expand and drip back down until it finally gets up to here. By this time, the water, which is heavier, it has a higher boiling point, kind of comes back down, and mostly alcohol comes over. And you collect it down here. The problem is, when I was rectifying alcohol with this thing, or purifying alcohol, it also rectifies the essential oils, and I was losing essential oils. This thing was more as fragrant as what I was catching, so I was losing essential oils. So I don't like this setup for distilling wine, that you need the essential oil. This is just for if you want a pure alcohol and you want it undetermined and as raw as can be. This is a pretty good setup. This is for the initial distillation, and then this is another fancy setup. This is how I rectify my alcohol. I put alcohol in here, and now I use a water to boil, to heat up the alcohol. It comes through this column, which helps to rectify it. It condenses down here, and just by doing that, the previous distillation setup I showed you, and this system right here with a vacuum, I can get a very, very pure alcohol in just 2 distillations. To measure the quality of the alcohol, you can do either 2 things. I have a hydrometer, which I put in liquid. I have the thinnest tube I can find, because sometimes I don't generate a lot of alcohol, especially when you do stuff like this, when you're using the roots to ferment. And I can't spare a big graduated cylinder, so I have just big enough so this will float freely. And this will measure the alcohol percentage of alcohol you have. Another way of doing it is, this is a small flask. It's a volumetric flask, and if I fill it exactly to where the mark is, and I could weigh it. And I have those weights for you if you want to explore this way of measuring your alcohol content. Thing I want to mention about the alcohol, and this is very important. If you're using your alcohol as an extractant to pour over an herb, the purer it is, the better it will extract. One nice way of thinking about it is as a sponge. If you take a sponge and it's completely wrung out, it's very absorbent and it could absorb a lot. If the sponge is half saturated and you try to mop up the floor, you're not going to pick up as much stuff. The same applies with mercury. If the mercury is so pure, it's like a sponge that's completely wrung out. And now it has a higher extraction ability, and you can extract more of the plant essence and store it in the mercury as a carrier. One last thing on that second chart that I showed you, we talked about circulation. Again, the circulation you can do is as simple as a mason jar on top of your refrigerator. A little bit more elaborate setup is something that I did here, which I wanted to share with you. It's a box, very similar to that fermentation box. The bottom has 2 light bulbs that I use for a heating source. It has that wonder board, which is like a masonry board that you can cut and saw and drill, do whatever you want with. That holds heat in. And then what I do is I put an aluminum plate to cover that. I want it in complete darkness. So now it's in complete darkness by this aluminum plate that I cover it with. And I put these dividers in, and I can hold flasks. I have several different size dividers. 100 milliliter flask all the way up to a 1,000 milliliter flask. This is my assistant. Here's the flask. You can put a substance in here, and it has this top on. I do the same thing with this. This one's open right now because we're going. This is his concoction. We open this up, which is open now. We pull a vacuum on this, and we can bring the vacuum way up, which means that this stuff will evaporate at a lower temperature. We close the petcock. We put this back down in. It heats up. As it heats up, some of the substance will evaporate. As it evaporates, up here is much cooler, right? The top is much cooler than down here in the heat, and it drips down. You can see the one in the back, all the condensation on it. And it drips back down into here. It's constantly circulating the substance in there, and that's real important for some things, and we'll show you that tomorrow. We'll show you why it's important tomorrow. I also put one in the back with a thermometer so I can measure the temperature that I have. I have a little rheostat here where I can vary the temperature up or down. One other thing that I'll mention shortly, there's different types of water. You can collect rainwater. You can also collect dew. There's different ways of collecting dew, and there's some controversy depending on who you talk to. This is a method I use because I don't like anything to touch or to be contaminated by other things. I take basically a wine bottle, I lay it horizontally in the freezer, fill it halfway up with water, let it freeze, then I stand it up, fill it up, more with water, let it freeze until I get the whole bottle filled with water that's frozen. I put this outside in the morning before daylight. This is actually before daylight, except the flash made it look like daylight. I put it on a pie plate, and I usually pick the highest area. This is in a meadow that I usually pick stuff from. And I put the pie plate out at the highest peak of the area. I don't want the lower valley areas. I pick the high. This is actually on top of a grass peak or hill. And I put this down. What happens is the condensation, the coldness, condenses the liquid or the moisture in the air, and it drips down and collects in this pie plate. I don't know if you can see it. You can barely see it. But it forms a pretty big puddle. Depends how much moisture is in the air and what time of day you put it out. Ideally, I like to do this right before sunset, before sunrise. I put it out and get as much water as I can and collect it. And I'll talk about this in one moment, and maybe we'll take a break after this. When I finish with my products and you separate them, it's important on how they're stored. And I'll explain that after the break. But this is how I store them. For bigger jars, when I purify a substance, whether it be a salt or an essential oil or an alcohol, and it's pure, I like to wrap it in silk, and I'll explain why. And I like to keep it in a special area, and always label what you have. I don't know if you can see labels here, but label what you have. After a while, I had this out. How old is this? You'll find things that you kind of forget about. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. And I think that's it for slides. Yes. Any questions so far? I know this sounds overwhelming. In fact, before we take a break, I need to do one other thing. I want to revisit this one system, this one flowchart again. I just showed you a whole bunch of fancy lab equipment. Let's take a look at this one more time. Now we kind of hopefully have a little bit of a feel for what we did. How could we do this with very little or no equipment? Well, to get the herb, we can pick it or we could buy it in the store. No big deal. The alcohol, like I said, if you're just starting out, all you have to do is basically go to a liquor store. You could buy some Everclear or some vodka or some 151 rum. What do you like better? Everclear is a higher percentage of alcohol, and it's probably, I think, a better way of going if you can get it. So you put the alcohol and the herb together, and you circulate it. To circulate it, we're going to put it in a mason jar. Get a big quart mason jar, only fill it up, maybe about no more than halfway, and leave it in a place where there's mild heat. It could be on top of a refrigerator, a pilot light of a stove. It doesn't even have to be on any heat. But what you want to do is you want that to just sit and let the alcohol work on the plant. It might be real helpful to take that and every day succuss it. Just take it and shake it. You'll be amazed at how much of an extraction process that adds by just shaking the bottle. So we're going to shake the bottle up every day, and we're going to let it sit for a little bit of time. Then we pour off the alcohol, and we have our alcohol and our essential oil. That part's done. So far, no equipment except the mason jar and a bottle of Everclear from the liquor store. Now we take our plant remains. We have to calcinate that. Well, we could put it in a cast iron pot or skillet and put it on your outdoor barbecue if you have one. And you incinerate it. And after you incinerate it, you have a bunch of ashes left. Well, we're already down to here, and we hopefully haven't bought anything yet. You'll probably find all this stuff in your house. So now we have to extract the water-soluble minerals. Oh God, there's more lab equipment. Well, not really. What you could do is you take those salts, you put them in a big quart mason jar, and you pour some distilled water on them. And you do the same thing. You shake it up, and you let it sit for a couple of minutes, and you shake it up some more. And when you're done, you do that a few times, and you let all that ashes settle on the bottom. They'll actually settle down, and you have a grayish colored liquid on the top, and you have all the ashes on the bottom. Real carefully and real slowly, you pour off the liquid. You decant it. When you pour off all the liquid, you throw the ashes out. You have the water-soluble salts now. You didn't need a fancy apparatus to do that. So now we're up to here. We discard the stuff we don't need. Now we're going to boil and evaporate it to dryness. So we're going to put it in some kind of container. It could be a teapot, a glass teapot. And you put it on your stove. It doesn't smell or anything. It's like making tea. And you boil it down to reduce it down so the liquid gets a lower volume. When the volume gets down low enough, we put it in a pie plate. Again, something you can buy in housewares, in any kitchen supply place. You evaporate it to dryness. You could do this on your stove if you do it at a really low temperature. You could put it in your oven and just bake it at a low temperature. You're evaporating the water out. When it gets to a dryness, you take that salt, or those minerals, you scrape them all together, and you calcinate them. Oh God, how am I going to do that? The only piece of equipment, lab equipment you need to buy is a porcelain crucible. So far. That's the only thing we need. You put it in a little porcelain crucible, and you could heat it up with a propane torch that you get at a hardware store, or you may have one in your cellar. And you stir that with a little glass rod or even a spoon if you want to. And you take those ashes and you heat them up to calcinate them. You take those ashes now, you put them back in a mason jar. You pour some distilled water on them to rehydrate them. Now what we have to do is filter them. You get a filter, and for filter paper you can use a coffee filter. And you pour that liquid through the coffee filter and funnel, and you collect that liquid. Now you have purified salt. You evaporate them down again into a powder, and you have separated all your things. The only thing you bought was a crucible. You could do this thing real simple. Now you're going to say, well, this isn't as good of a product as all that lab equipment. It's not true. It's the same process. You're mimicking nature. Maybe not as impressive looking, maybe not as sophisticated, but it's just as efficient. It's the energy you put into your product. It's not the lab equipment that makes the product. It's the energy you imbue into it. Now, I must point out one other thing, and we'll take our break. I showed you this other more elaborate system. What's the difference? Why would I do this? This is a lot easier. Why would I want to do all of this? Well, this has a different premise. We're doing what's called a complete separation. We're getting our essential oil, our alcohol, and our water-soluble minerals, two different types. Over here we had brought the essential oils and the essential oils and the alcohol over together. The complete separation, we can purify it to a higher level. There is less physical matter. This is more an energetic product. The other one is a more corporeal product. This one, this easier one, has more effect on your physical body. This has a more effect on your psychic. Now you say, well, this is so easy. Can't I make this and elevate it to a higher degree? Well, you can, and I'll tell you what you can do. This is a good way of doing that. This one, as you said, the only thing we need to do this process was a crucible. The rest of the stuff we probably have. Does anybody, other than the crucible, does everybody have the other components we need? A barbecue grill and a couple of mason jars, coffee filter, and a propane torch. Anybody not have any of that stuff? A torch. Okay. So you're in business. You have your lab set up. Now, like I said before, this process is not quite as rarefied. You don't end up with as rarefied a product as the other one. So how can we kick this up a few notches? Well, it's very simple. It has to do when we recombined it. When we recombine the alcohol and the essential oils with the salt, we're starting with Everclear, let's say. We're going to mix these two together. And all of these may not dissolve. If we have enough salts, they will not all dissolve in this product, depending on how much water content is in here. Whatever doesn't dissolve, we pour off. We take that product and we calcinate it again. And then we throw it back in this product. And we mix it up. We shake it up. We let it sit. Anything that settles down, we gently pour it off again. We calcinate it. And we continue to do that. And what we're doing is we're pulling out impurities in the alcohol. We're pulling out impurities in the essential oil. And we're eliminating them. We're raising this up to a higher vibratory level. We're bringing it closer to an ethereal product, more like an ethereal product than a corporeal product. And it's elevating this to a higher level. So you can get all the same benefits without all that lab equipment, or you can go the lab route. They both have advantages. They both have disadvantages. This is very simple, very easy. You don't need much equipment. If you like it, you may want to get a little bit more complex in your processes and a little bit more elaborate. They have certain advantages. When you do that complete separation, you can get into other aspects of spagyrics, making plant stones and different types of products. Are there any questions on the processing? I know it's a lot to absorb, and if you've never seen this before, you go, oh my God. You're going to see tomorrow, it's not that complex. It's not that hard. It's a lot of fun, and there's a lot to learn. You'll see things and experience things, hopefully, that might be really rewarding. Are there any questions so far? If we can take a short break, and then I'd like to tell you, now that we separated these components, what do we do with them? How do we reassemble them? And once we reassemble them, what do we do with them? So if we just take a real short break, and we'll sum this all up back. We're going to get started again because we're running a little shy on time. I messed up. We were on time until now, Russ. I have a little bit more information I'd like to share with you, and then Mark has a presentation, and I'm cutting into his time a little bit. So I'm going to go pretty quick, but I want to cover the important parts. Now that we assembled our products, I know that might have been overwhelming. We've talked about a lot of different things. If you've never seen it before, oh my God, I don't get this. Hopefully tomorrow it will make a lot more sense. You'll see the process, and you'll see it's not that complicated. And it's actually a pretty relaxing process, because once you set it up, you just stay there and observe it and imbue your energy into it. And it's an interesting process to see. But once we separate our products, what do we do now? Now we have this essential oil, we have this alcohol, and we have our minerals. What do we do with them? Well, we could just stick them all together and assemble them, and we have a spagyric product. But there's other ways of combining this and other ways of thinking about this. When you take that salt and you purify it, you rarefy it, you make it such a pure vehicle, it's lacking or it's missing its soul, the sulfur. It's lacking and it's missing its spirit, the alcohol. It's magnetic. It's saying, where's my soul? Where's my spirit? And it wants to attract it to stabilize again. It's off balance. It's negatively or positively charged, depending on how you want to look at it. It's looking to stabilize itself. The same with the sulfur. The sulfur is saying, where's my spirit? Where's my body? And the mercury, or the mercury is saying, where's my soul and where's my body? So they're all looking for each other. They're very magnetic. They're looking to stabilize. At this point, they're also very sensitive. That's why it's important not to subject your purified products to other people's thoughts and negative emotions and bad attitudes. And you remember that last slide I showed you? I showed you some products with silk wrapped around them. And I don't know if you noticed, but I keep my products wrapped in silk. It sounds kind of corny, but they found that silk, metaphysically speaking, I shouldn't say they found, metaphysics has found, that silk acts as an insulator. And on an electrostatic basis, there does have some properties with electrons and electrostatic charges. But what silk does, especially white reflects all colors. It also reflects all emotions and also thought forms and whatnot. But silk acts as an insulator, and it prevents contamination from affecting your product. Now, this is sounding a little weird. What do you mean contaminating your product? Remember, it's almost like a battery. It can hold a charge. If it's not charged and it's very purified, it's looking to attract something. If you subject it to something negative, it will attract and absorb and hold that energy. So you want to keep it in a clean place, and you don't want to really go into your laboratory, and we'll talk about this tomorrow also, unless you're calm, centered, and focused. Because you will imbue that energy. Remember, you can't separate the experiment from the experimenter. You'll imbue that energy into your product. They're very sensitive, so we want to treat them very carefully. Once you provide a clean fit, unoccupied vehicle or a product, other subtle energies could utilize it or inhabit it and partially charge it or fully charge it, thereby contaminating it. So after you reassemble your product, they're more stable because the sulfur has found its spirit and it's found its body and so on for the other principles. But they're still highly magnetic and can take on additional charge. Just like a sponge analogy I mentioned to you before. Just because you have a sponge and you soak up some liquid doesn't mean it's fully saturated. There's still some room there to take on additional charge. So what can we do? Well, after we assemble our product, we can now charge our products. In fact, talismanic magic is based on charging substances with certain forces or energies. In a somewhat similar fashion, that's what holy water is, and anointing oils. They're substances that are highly charged. So to further stabilize your product and further supercharge it or specify it, you can charge them. And what do I mean by specify? A lot of the products we're using, or all the products we're doing in Spagyrics, are made from plants. Now, plants have different attributes, and they can be specified in either of two ways. And this might not make sense, but we're going to cover this in a moment. A plant can either be specified to one direction or another direction. So since it can go either way, we might want to specify it to this side or to that side. If that doesn't make sense, it will in a moment, I hope. So by charging our products, we can more fully saturate them and leaving little room for any outside influences to affect them. Now, how do we charge them? I'm going to give you a very simple way of charging a product, Kabbalistically. If you're interested, and I don't know if the group is interested, if you are, we don't have time to go into the more elaborate one, but tomorrow, if you are, just remind me and we can take a break from our lab work, and I can show you a more sophisticated way of charging your product Kabbalistically. But for now, let's just take a look at a very simple way of doing this. Remember the tree of life that we were talking about? There are different sephiroth on the tree of life. And energy comes down into manifestation through this lightning bolt. And first it comes down through Kether, then Chachma, then Bina, and Hesed, and so on, all the way down through the tree. So if we have a product and we want to specify it to a particular energy, let's say Hesed, what we could do is put a little drawing of a tree of life in our laboratory, and we can envision, using our mind, as we talked about earlier, using your mind to envision energy coming down through the top of the tree of life, lighting up this emanation or this sphere of energy. And then it arcs and sparks itself down to Hakva and energizes this Sephiroth. And the energy now zooms across to here, energizes this, zooms across to here, energizes this. At this point, you have your product in front of you, not with the silk on, in front of you, and you see this sphere build up with such intensity and such brightness that it actually arcs and jumps a spark into your product. And now your product starts to glow in your mind's eye. This is your imagination, just like when we stood up and embodied divine power. You are embodying this tree with energy and seeing this energy emanate and arc into your product. And now you use your imagination. Energy follows thought. It's an occult axiom. You see your bottle of whatever it is glow and fill up with bright light. And then you see this gap of energy, the spark of energy break, and the energy goes back up the tree, but your bottle is still glowing, supercharged with this energy. And you hold that image in your mind's eye. When you're done, you now take silk, wrap up your product, and just let it sit and let that energy permeate your product. Now, after you charge your product, what do? Great, you got all these bottles wrapped in silk. What do you do with them? There's lots of things you can use these products for. Sure. It's a good question. Sure. The question was, how come we stopped over here at Hesed? Why didn't we continue down and follow this path, the lightning bolt, or the flaming sword as it's sometimes called, all the way down to the bottom? The reason is because we wanted to attune our product to this level of energy. If we were working down here, we can bring the energy down a little bit lower. But we wanted to specify it to this particular area. And there's a reason which I'm about to cover, which will tell you why we stopped here. And this is the energy we wanted to attune to, or set the product to. If we wanted to work with this energy, we would stop here. We would just see the energy go to here. Or if it was down here, then we would follow the energy, follow it all the way down, light this up, and arc it down to our product. So it depends where you want to specify yourself on the tree of life with your product. Any other questions? Okay. So this is where we're going to go with this. You can use these products for personal growth and attunement, not just physically, but spiritually and psychologically. There's a Hermetic axiom that states, as above, as below. That axiom is referred to as the law of correspondence by some philosophies. For example, you can have a solar system, which is an exact miniature replica of a galaxy. And you can have an atom, which is an exact miniature replica of the solar system. And so on and so on. In fact, it's interesting, if you do and compare the distances between the planets and the sun, there are approximately the same distances between the nucleus of an atom and the electrons. They say that matter is mostly empty space, just like our universe, or our solar system rather, is mostly empty space. Our whole solar system may be just a little atom in a big cosmic creation. In fact, if the law of correspondence holds so true that there was a famous, and I forget his name, I tried to find it and I couldn't locate it in time, but there was an astrophysicist that said he made his discoveries not by looking at a telescope, but by looking in a microscope. He saw what happened on a microcosmic level, and he applied that to the cosmos. And he later on found out to be very accurate. Now, if this correlation exists, then there should be a relationship between our solar system and us. In fact, that's what astrology is based on. The astrologists believe that the planets of our solar system, including the sun and the moon, had a sympathetic relationship with us. Remember the little sign we had earlier? If I can find it quickly. That everything has that is in manifestation, anything that is in matter, also has finer aspects to it. Remember, this is unity. This is the all. We broke it into 3 divisions. If it has matter, it also has more subtle energy levels within it. It's not the physical body of the planet that affects us. It's the consciousness or the spiritual aspect of the planet. So it's not that the moon or planet Jupiter is affecting us, the physical body of the planet. It's the energetic aspects of the planet that are affecting us. And how do they affect us? Well, they may affect us physically. They may affect us psychologically or spiritually or mentally. But how do they affect us? And what parts do they affect? Some believe it's our glands. Because after all, the glands control the whole physical body. The glands can create certain hormones that will change the way we think, the way we feel, the way we act. But the glands are only the physical aspect of our body. What is the essence? Remember we said before about there was a salt, and we said there was an essence of salt on the tree of life? And we said there was we said there was sulfur, and we said there was an essence of sulfur, and we said there was mercury, the spirit, and of the mercury there was an essence of it. Well, there is also an essence to our glands. The physical manifestation of our glands are the organs, our thyroid gland, our thymus gland, and so on and so forth. But the Eastern philosophies believe that these are just the gross manifestation of a very subtle energy. And these subtle energies were called chakras. And this depicts a picture of different chakras within the body. Energy centers. And these energy centers happen to be where all the major glands of your body are. The pituitary gland. This one is an emanation of the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the thymus, the pancreas or spleen, the gonads. There's different energy centers within us, and there's glands that are manifested in those areas. Now, it's interesting, the location of these, and I have these handouts for everybody, so don't feel like you need to copy anything down. Tomorrow we'll give you some handouts to summarize all the charts we put up here. Excuse me. But these are the names of the chakras, the Muladhara, the Swadhisthana, and so on and so forth. Those are the Eastern philosophy names, but we translated them underneath: base, sexual, solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, and crown. This is their location according to clairvoyance. This is the gland that they have an affiliation or a correspondence with. And then there's another column here that affiliates them with planets. So these are the planets. The energy of these planets are affecting the chakras, which are affecting the glands, which are affecting us. Now, the herbalists and spagyrists of old attributed every planet to a plant. And we're weaving quite a story here. Tomorrow, I will give you a chart of some of those affiliations. What plants were ruled by what planet? Because just as the planets affect us, the planets affect certain plants. Modern researchers in the early 1900s claimed that they established this relationship between plants and planetary energies. And for those who are interested in this area, it'd be worth looking into the works of Lillian Kalisko and Agnes Fyffe, because they did a lot of work with capillary dynamics to show the correlation of planetary energies and how they affect plants and how they affect minerals on the planet. So to summarize, the spagyrists selects 7 plants which have a correspondence to our 7 major planetary bodies. I'm sorry, I said planets or planets? It's been a long day for me. Select 7 plants. So you go out and you pick 7 plants that correspond to the 7 major planetary bodies up in space of the old astrologists, which correspond to our 7 major glands or energy centers. You prepare a product, a spagyric product from each one of these plants. So you'll have 7 altogether. Tomorrow you'll have 2 on your own. So you have to make 5 for yourself. And then you use these products on a rotational basis. What's the rotational basis? It's interesting to see that the names of the days of the week are based on the planets. I'm not very good at we'll have to get somebody to translate, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce them. But Monday is Moon Day. That's the day of the moon. Tuesday was the day of Mars. Wednesday was Mercury. Thursday was Jupiter. Friday was Venus. Saturday was Saturn. And Sunday was the Sun. I put under here in French what the names are, and they're more in line. I think it's pronounced Mardi, Mars, and somebody can help me out with the names because I'll probably murder the pronunciations of them. It was believed that these planets had a correspondence effect or an affinity to these particular days of the week. So let's see if we have this story right. Let's review this one more time because this is getting kind of complicated, isn't it? The Spagyricist prepares 7 extracts based on the 7 planets and takes the appropriate extract to attune to that specific energy available on that day. And that specific energy would stimulate the corresponding energy center within that person who's taking the product. And this might sound kind of unusual, but think about it. Certain foods have a certain affinity to our body. If we eat foods high in calcium, they're very good for our bones. You mean to tell me you eat something and it affects a certain part of your body? Well, that's exactly what we're saying. If you eat something high in iodine, it goes right to your thyroid gland. If you eat something high in potassium, a lot of that potassium will go to your heart. So our nutrients do that. Same with energies. These subtle energies have an affinity to certain parts of our body. By making and using these products as described, it has the effect of stimulating or raising the vibratory condition of each of those energy centers or chakras, thereby supercharging them and making them a better receiver and transmitter of energy. You're stimulating certain energy centers in your body which affect everything about you. This is one reason why many have claimed inner contact and higher states of consciousness by using spagyric products. These are not just for the body. These are for the mind and for the spirit. But don't take mine or anyone else's word for it. Try it yourself. Tomorrow you'll have 2 of these products. I don't think a sincere seeker will be disappointed if you follow this path. By using these products on a regular basis, you are acknowledging and nurturing your spiritual self. And you are participating in the evolution and refining of your own consciousness. Just as you are what you eat, so is the content of your consciousness what you think. As you regularly feed your consciousness spiritual thoughts, you nourish your soul and you give it the sustenance it needs to blossom and grow. It then becomes the guiding light in your life. It subjugates your personality to its rightful place, which is a vehicle of expression. We kind of got it a little backwards. We're using the vehicle and thinking the vehicle is the main essence of what we are. It's just a vehicle of expression. There is a spiritual component that is really what we're about. The effects of this are far-reaching. It impacts your words, your actions, your character, as these are all manifestations of your consciousness, and this affects your consciousness. You begin to look beyond the corporeal and attune to the divine nature of things. The Spagyricist is in a gradual way is becoming both the center and circumference of his work. The experiment merges with the experimenter. The Spagyricist, instead of purifying and refining plant substances, purifies and refines himself. And to further enhance this process, I found 2 other practices extremely helpful. One of them is dream work. In dream work, it's important to record your dreams. The reason is very simple. You're building a bridge between your subconscious mind and your waking mind. Right now I'm talking to you and you're listening to me with your waking mind consciousness. When you go to sleep, you go into more of a subconscious state. By recording your dreams, you're building a bridge between the subconscious states of mind and your conscious states of mind. you're integrating them. Now, a couple of helpful points. There's a point of twilight between falling asleep and between waking up that are very important. That's when you can build a bridge the easiest. When you first wake up in the morning, try to recall your dreams and write them down. If you wake up during the night and you remember a dream, write it down instantly. You say, oh, I'll remember it tomorrow morning. You'll forget it most likely because the door is shut. When the door is open and you remember something, write it down in a dream book right next to the side of your bed. When you first wake up in the morning, just open your eyes and pop out of the bed. Lay there for a while and try to recollect anything you can. That's the point of twilight, is when the door is open and you can transfer and bring more energy, more information over and try to recall it. As you start to build that bridge, you will start to recall more and more information. When I first started a dream diary, I would write down 3 or 4 words about a dream, something vaguely remembered. Now it gets to the point I could fill up a diary, 10 pages on one dream. I remember so much. You're building a bridge between your conscious and subconscious mind. If you can stretch the points of twilight between falling asleep and waking up, you leave a bigger door open to transfer information back and forth. Once that bridge is built, it's easier to recall and access that information because you already done it. You have built the bridge. A couple of quick little pointers. One about falling asleep. Watch yourself fall asleep if you can. And just find yourself drifting off and you cast away your body and you freeze your consciousness. There's a way of stretching that. It's kind of funny. It's a fun thing to experiment with. As you're falling asleep, if you're lying on your back, you can put your hand, hold it up over your head. When you get to that drowsy state. As you get drowsy, you'll come down and you'll wake yourself up again because your hand hits your head. And you can do this and you're extending that twilight point. And it helps you to bridge that point of consciousness. The other thing you could do is meditation work. If you meditate at regular times, which was talked about earlier, also keep a journal. Because you might be in a deep meditation, and when you come out of it, you can say, wow, that's pretty profound. I'll remember that. That's part of me. But then a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a couple of years later, you forget it. I've looked back in a meditation journal, things that I thought about or contemplated 5 years ago, and I said, God, I thought that? And I didn't even realize what I was attuning to at the time. If you keep a journal, it will refresh your memory. You're building a bridge and transferring that information. In meditation, it's a whole subject unto itself. But basically what you're doing is you're building a bridge between your conscious mind and your superconscious mind. So in dream work, you're building subconscious to conscious. In meditation, you're building conscious to superconscious, or higher self. In your meditation, it's also important to do almost the same thing. The first thing you want to do is you want to be receptive. So whatever you want to meditate on is fine. After that, go into a receptive state where you empty yourself. You're not there. Just like when you stood up with divine energy, you weren't there. You're not there anymore. Empty yourself and see what comes to you. Meditation is really listening. It's not asking, it's listening. And then have a point of reflection where you think back, okay, what did I perceive? If you don't attune to what you perceive, you're not going to perceive anything. It'll go right over your head. It'll be beyond your point of perception. So what you want to do is increase your perception. Say, what did I attune to? What did I feel? What do I sense? What do I think? And try to record it. Again, the words may not flow initially, but as you do it more and more, you're building a stronger bridge. And more information will come over. Now these practices help to integrate your subconscious, waking consciousness, and your superconsciousness into one. It's said that adepts who achieve this obtain full use of their mind. They have no breaks of consciousness between waking and sleeping, between life and death, between incarnations. What's immortality but continuation of consciousness? If when you fall asleep, you don't lose consciousness, but you just stay awake and just shift your point of existence. And then when you die, instead of your consciousness leaving, you're following your consciousness and you're aware of things. There's no more of that veil. The veil is torn. We all have this potential. As we refine and purify ourselves, we evolve to a higher state. We circle our square. As I said earlier, we spiritualize matter. We spiritualize ourselves. And that's what Spagyrics and Alchemy are all about. Are there any questions? Comments? running kind of late. I apologize, Mark. Okay, tomorrow will be the lab day, and hopefully we'll get some products made and answer any questions you have, and we'll cover some other things if you're interested. Thank you very much.